Welcome to PCMC. I'm Mike Bongiorno. This is Pop Culture Man Children. That's what the kids on the street call PCMC. I talk to the kids on the street and they say, "Hey, PC, you want to buy some PCMC?" And I don't know what they're talking about. I'm here today with my good friend and yours, Mr. Peter Marsh.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
You know, Pete from the Lassercast and Comic Books Transformed, and here he is again today on PCMC. Pete, you were just saying something that was interesting. We were talking before we were on air. We were talking about the new Ghostbusters and the new Godzilla versus Kong, or Godzilla times Kong. Which reminds me of Alien 3 is Alien Cubed. It's Alien times Alien times Alien. And I always say, like, this podcast is your one-stop shop for non-toxic fandom. But I want to say, like, I want to make it clear to people what I mean by that is not it's not that we're like we like everything. It's not like everything's 4 stars.
Yeah.
Because that would be pointless. We criticize things, we make fun of things, we talk about how things are bad. To me, that's part of the love of media. You know, like, I just did my last episode was on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and I talked about what I liked and what I didn't like. And you know, yesterday I went to see Godzilla vs. Kong times Kong with Jen. And while, like, I guess the first fight between King Kong, when King Kong like had like he needed a root canal, I looked at Jen and I was like, thanks for coming to this stupid movie with me.
Yeah.
But I still love it. So what I mean, here's what I really mean. When I say non-toxic fandom, I mean, you're never going to hear me go, you know what I don't like about this movie? There's too many Chinese people in it. Like, you're never going to hear that from me.
Yeah.
I'll say a movie's bad, or I'll say, you know, we're critical. Criticism is part of the love. Like, when a new Star Wars movie comes out, I feel like every conversation I have with one of my friends is like, what did you hate? What did you love? How would you rewrite it yourself? Right. And
Right.
that's part of it. To me, that's part of the overall, like, good part of fandom. I'm not saying like there shouldn't be criticism. It's just, to me, toxicity is like, hey, you know what we should do? I really hated the new Kong movie. Let's find the actress in the movie and just, like, destroy her on Twitter. Let's say we're gonna, like, call her the C word. That'd be a fun way to exercise our fandom. That's what I mean.
No, I get it, man. I get it. And as, like, a guy that has YouTube channels and a podcast, you know, you see all the views that you get on YouTube, you see all the listens you get on your podcast. And I know for a fact that because me and Brian or me and Danny often speak positively about these movies, that, like, that affects how many views we get. Like, it seems like
Sure.
YouTube in general is made, like, or the way it's become is that if you are, like, passionately mad about something, that's when you're going to get the most views. You
Yeah.
know, like, you and
Yes.
I talk about Star Wars like so much every time I come on your show.
Mhm.
And, like, there's this one dude, his name's Star Wars Theory. Have you ever seen any of his
Yeah,
videos?
yeah.
Yeah, like, yeah,
Yeah.
that dude, it's like he kind of embodies that, like, okay, I hate woke Disney and I hate,
Kathleen Kennedy is the worst thing ever.
right. And so people eat that shit up. He's got millions of followers, millions of
I
views.
know.
A lot of the times when I review something with one of my friends, it's either, hey, that was actually pretty good, but you know, I understand the idea to criticize these things because I saw Godzilla X Kong, I saw Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and I'm kind of critical of both of them
Yeah.
because I feel like they don't have that sense of wonder that the movie that we're going to talk about today has in spades.
Right. Today we're talking about a movie that I absolutely love. But there are some criticisms of it, for
Oh, sure.
sure. It kind of doesn't have much of a plot. It's sort of beginning, end. Um,
Right.
we're talking about Superman the movie,
Hmm.
which now a lot of times they just call Superman, from 1978. This is the year after Star Wars, and to me that's important because I'm very obsessed about the changeover from new American cinema to blockbuster cinema.
Hmm.
You know, new American cinema is Easy Riders and Raging Bulls and, you know, early Scorsese and that kind of, like, you know, Bonnie and Clyde,
Yes.
that kind of stuff. And then, like, you have the blockbuster stuff. And people always say, like, the beginning is either Jaws or Star Wars. But I feel like Superman is overlooked in that. And especially when you look at movies right now, obviously Superman is super influential for blockbuster movies going forward.
Mm-hmm. Totally 1,000% agree. And I was thinking, on your channel, do you really cover a lot of movies that are from the 70s? Like you mainly cover stuff that like you saw as a kid. And you saw this movie as a kid, obviously, but like it came out before your birth. Just
That's
like
interesting.
A New Hope came out too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I feel like I've never done this study. Probably most of it are from the 80s or later,
Yeah.
but we've gone as early as like the 50s and stuff.
Oh,
So
very cool.
we try to get a look at everything. The way since I'm talking so much about how I philosophize the show, the way
Yeah.
I think about PCMC is not every topic has to be popular culture. Like we do esoteric topics,
Mm-hmm.
but to me, it's looking at those things through a lens of pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, what's your history with Superman the movie?
Ah, okay. Great question. Great question. So often when I do these shows, I always talk about how like I see movies over and over again, or I saw movies over and over again on HBO when I was a kid. Like I just always had HBO playing at my house, like
Yeah,
whenever I was at my house. And this is a movie that like would just always be on. You'd see clips of it over and over again. I don't think in my life I've like watched this movie from beginning to end many times, but I've seen like parts of it a
yeah,
ton of times. But I remember like seeing this as a kid, and there's like certain scenes when you watch it now as an adult, you're like, oh yeah, this like really stood out to me as a kid. This had an effect on me as a kid. This
yeah,
part, there's a couple of parts like that in this.
yeah. It was shown to me as a kid a few times, and when I was a little kid, I thought it was boring because I was like,
Mm-hmm.
unless Superman was on screen flying, I was like not interested.
Yeah.
But then, like in my early 20s, I became like I got super into Superman just as a fan,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's when I really like watched it with fresh eyes and like really loved it. And I've watched it so many times since then. When I used to teach film, I would teach this movie. Um, Actually, I'm gonna talk later. I used to I taught a few times a class on race, gender, and sexuality in the media, and
Mm-hmm.
I used to show this to talk about gender and sexuality.
Huh. Okay.
Mostly we would focus in on the "Do you like pink? I like pink very much, Lois" scene.
Yes.
But I love it now. I mean, I just watched it again yesterday, and it's just I don't know. I think it's got that quality of like even though it it doesn't hold up visually the way like a Star Wars will or something.
Yeah.
I think it's gorgeous.
Oh, 1,000%. The cinematography in this movie is incredible. And it's
Yeah,
funny because you talk about how, like, in your early 20s, you really got into Superman. That's when I met you, was in your early 20s, right? And you were
yeah,
talking about on your Ghostbusters Frozen Empire episode that, like, oh, Ghostbusters is very intimate to you. And that's why you did the episode by yourself because it's very intimate. And to me, I was thinking that Superman was actually very intimate to you because I think you were even maybe wearing a fucking Superman t-shirt when I met you. You know,
yeah,
and we
yes.
talked about Superman a lot. Like, I don't know, people have probably heard my voice on this show a couple of times, but like, I'm a gigantic comic book fan, right?
Mm.
And I love comic books. I've read probably hundreds of comics with Superman in them, maybe thousands at this point in my life. And this movie, you could tell that this movie is the inspiration for so many writers and artists when it comes to Superman. You
Yes.
know,
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. It becomes well, there are things in the movie. The thing about the history of Superman, and this is true for a lot of pop culture, is as it continues to be adapted or readapted, people will add things to it, and the good things will stick and the bad things will fall away. Like in
Right.
the beginning, Superman didn't fly, he just jumped very high. And it had nothing to do with the sun, it had to do with gravity being different on Krypton. And Kryptonite was created by the radio show actually created a lot. Kryptonite,
Mm-hmm.
the Perry White character, I think maybe the Jimmy Olsen character, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Fortress of Solitude came later. Things got, and I think the movie adds a lot of things. The idea that the Fortress of Solitude is like crystalline, which is my
Mm-hmm.
favorite way of thinking of the Fortress of Solitude.
Mm-hmm.
It was early like a very much like a Batcave, and
Yes.
it had like big statues of bullshit. um, and the idea that he really is Kal-El and that he's gonna play Clark is like bumbling, I think is a lot of that comes from Christopher Reeve's decisions, and that becomes a
Hmm.
big part of I think Superman going forward.
Hmm.
And this might sound like a hot take. The idea that it's a love story between Lois and Clark really, I think, begins in this movie because in the original comic and in the early shows and radio show, Lois has a thing for Superman, but Superman is so alien, he doesn't really have a thing back for her. And a lot of the way that works itself out in the plot is
Yeah.
Lois wanting to prove that he's Superman. It's a lot of
Hmm.
like cat and mouse, like, I'm gonna prove you're Superman. Oh no, you're not. And then she tries to, and then she never is able to do it. In this movie,
Right.
really cement the idea, like, oh no, this is a love story. They both like each other,
Right.
and that you think about like then in the '90s you have Lois and Clark, which is like their love story is the center of the whole thing. It just
Hmm.
change over time, and the good things stick with it.
Yeah, that is a really, really excellent point. Like when I think about like my entire lifetime of being around, reading comics, watching like animated series based on DC characters, um, the Superman and Lois dynamic, their love is just as important as like Spider-Man and Mary Jane, right?
Mhm.
And it's interesting because like Batman, obviously Batman is always closely associated with Superman and like in movies, animation, and comics. And Batman really didn't have that kind of love that aspect until very, very recently, where it's been like him and Catwoman. But like him and
Yeah,
Catwoman have
yeah,
always had a thing, and that goes all the way back to, the 70s or whatever. And Batman Returns shows it obviously, but like they've made that more of a thing now in modern comics, and often like they have
yeah.
a kid together, the two of them. And then like in Golden Age and Silver Age comics, there's like an alternate future where Batman and Catwoman have a daughter. Her name's
Yeah.
Huntress. But there's always this idea of like Lois and Clark getting together. And you mentioned the show from the 90s, which is I'm glad you did that. But then there's also a modern show called Superman and Lois, which
Yes,
is
yeah,
about,
yeah.
you know, so, and then I just wanted to bring up one other point too, because I don't want to forget it. Like, that was a really great job talking about like the Fortress of Solitude and stuff like that. Like, I feel like there's certain things that they don't ever rewrite that like they always keep now. And the Fortress of Solitude always does have crystals of some kind. There's
Yeah.
always crystals. It's always in the Arctic. They do have big statues and stuff in the fortress in the comics, but often in like the movies and stuff, it's just this barren kind of fortress like we
Yeah.
see in this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so what I think is kind of extraordinary about the movie is it has three sections, and each section has its own tone. And with
Mm-hmm.
that tone comes its own like way of its own cinematography, its own performance style. You could break them down as Krypton, Smallville, Kansas, and then Metropolis. But like the tonally, like Krypton is like Greek tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
Like even the way they talk is like Shakespearean. It reminds me of Plato's cave. The idea of Plato's cave, like the person is a prisoner in the cave, and they're staring at the wall, and they're let free, and they try to come back and convince the other people in the cave that what they're seeing is not real, and they don't believe him. Like that whole scene
Yeah.
where everyone's telling fucking Marlon Brando,
Jarrell.
like, you're
Yeah.
crazy, be reasonable, Jor-El. Like
Yeah.
that's like this, like Shakespearean thing. And then Kansas is like it's like a John Ford movie. It's these wide open vistas and these sweeping shots, and like this it's like Americana, and very
Mm-hmm.
like some of it reminds me of like Norman Rockwell kind of stuff. And then when you
Mm-hmm.
get to Metropolis, it's like an upbeat, like screwball comedy. Like all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, like the dialogue is much more snappy, and people are making jokes, and you've got Otis walking around, and a dog barking at him because he's trying to steal from a blind person. It's like each one, it's like three different movies, and they have different
Yeah.
music to all of them, and it's really crazy. It's really amazing the way they do that.
Yeah, that is a really excellent point. I completely agree with you that there's like three distinct segments. It's kind of ironic, because I'm from New York, just like you. And you would kind of think that the Metropolis stuff, which like kind of takes place in New York, like they go past the Statue of Liberty. I think you see the World Trade Center at one point in
Right,
this
right.
one.
In the movies, it is New York.
Right. So it's got that like kind of bustling feeling, and also like there's like little hints of like crime and stuff
Yeah.
in Metropolis. It's not that sort of, in more modern versions of Superman, whether it's the comics or animated shows and stuff, Metropolis is like more futuristic and has like cool technology. But in this, it's very much like New York of the 70s. And
Yes, I
um
love that.
that's the way that I was raised. I kind of feel the closest to that kind of sequence. But it's funny, this time around, I actually really like the Smallville stuff the best.
Mhm.
And I'm not some sort of like, oh, that's where America's great, where it's all white people and farms. I think that I really like that sequence in Smallville, even though it's like the smallest sequence. It's
Mhm.
because like the cinematography, I think, is at its best there. And I also think that like the emotional beats that they hit in the Smallville sequence are the most genuine emotional beats.
Yes, yes.
And there's very little dialogue in those scenes compared to the other two sequences,
Mm.
but it's just enough. I don't know. I think I always kind of remember those sequences from when I was a kid, like when he's on the Smallville farm. Maybe when
Yeah.
I was watching on HBO, that was the part that I always just ended up catching, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I think Richard Donner was really smart in saying, like, we need to treat Superman's story like it's American mythology.
Hmm.
One of the things that people, maybe younger people, wouldn't understand now is that people used to think of comic books as like not art, as like something for children, as not anything important. And before Superman the movie, the biggest sort of high profile adaptation of anything would be the Adam West Batman show, which
Hmm.
was a satire. It was popular, but in itself, it was sort of making fun of superheroes and dressing up in costume and stuff. So when it came time to like write or to make the Superman movie, well, the first draft that was written by Mario Puzo was very jokey, and
Hmm.
Richard Donner was like, "We got to take all of this out." And he said the word he used to people in the production was verisimilitude, which means like a sense of reality. Now, like the movie's in no way realistic, visually or story wise, but what I think he meant by verisimilitude was like take it seriously. Like the stakes have to be real. It can't be winking at you. It can't be making fun of you for watching it. It can't be making fun of itself. Like appreciate that it's the 70s, but it came out in the late 30s. So it's at this time it's still old and it's a big part of American life. Appreciate that people care about the character and just treat it with a lot of respect. And it's a really,
Hmm.
when you think about it, right now, like superheroes are such an important part of like pop culture. It's a huge swing. It's probably as much of a swing as like Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. Of like,
Mm.
the point is that you take this seriously.
Hmm. Yes, yes. And it takes its time, just like Batman Begins. Like, I
Mm.
don't think Superman shows up in costume until like at least an hour into the movie.
Yeah, yeah,
And there is this real focus, like you said before, on each segment of Superman's personality, of his life history. We spend like over 20 minutes on Krypton. There's like probably like close to 20 minutes in Smallville. And
yeah,
then when he shows up in Metropolis, it's not just like he's flying into Metropolis and he's a superhero. It's like
right.
you establish him as Clark Kent, you establish all the people in the Daily Planet office. So like everything that is a component of what Superman is fleshed out and kind of put on the table,
Yeah.
before you get to him being the superhero. That's I mean, what's funny is RoboCop is another movie that I've always seen parts of, but I almost never see all the way straight
Yeah.
through. And I rewatched RoboCop because I watched this amazing documentary called RoboDoc and I covered it on the Lassercast. And it's funny because like RoboCop and Superman have a very similar
Mm-hmm.
like introduction where it's like you don't see them for over
Yeah.
40 minutes, and then they come in and it's like this montage of them stopping crimes and doing things,
Yeah.
and it's so dramatic in both cases, but it's like you really couldn't do better in either case.
And they're both super uh Christ-like figures.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, very much so. I mean, like, you know, Jor-El putting Superman, putting a Kal-El in the ship to send them to Earth is like, it's like Moses, and
Moses.
you
Yeah.
know, and we see him as a kid, and then he shows up, and he's fully formed at 30, which is like Christ in the Bible. And of course, like RoboCop is like Paul Verhoeven will tell you endlessly, like it's to him, it's just a Christ story. Like RoboCop
Yes.
walks on water at one point.
Yes.
Um,
Well, I mean, like in this, it's funny because there aren't that many Christ images in this as you get in like the Zack Snyder Superman
yeah.
movies, and even in Superman Returns, there's Christ-like image. But it's funny we're talking about this right before Easter too. But like in this though, there's obviously the dynamic between Jor-El and Kal-El, and like there's in the end, Kal-El, Superman's flying up into the clouds, and Jor-El's talking to him through the clouds. That's like very much like God and Jesus right
Yeah,
there,
yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, but you make a really great point about the how he kind of goes away in the middle and he comes back as Superman. And I don't know like how we're gonna do this as far as like if we're going in order talking about things, but um with the Smallville sequence, watching it again, I really love Jeff East, who plays
Uh-huh.
teenage Clark.
Yeah.
And then, you have this sequence, which when I watched it again last time, I was like, that's really weird. He like goes away for 12 years and he's just not
Yeah, right?
around.
He like
And
incubates.
yeah, right. And he just shows up as fully formed Superman in the costume. So
Yeah.
it's weird that there's this like distinct period because they don't really do that in the comics or any other media. Like the way
Yeah.
they do it in the comics usually and in other media is that like Clark leaves Smallville and he travels the Earth and he like goes to different countries and stuff and kind of sees things. Kind of the way that Bruce leaves Gotham
Yeah.
and like educates himself. But the idea is that like they leave home and they learn about the world and then they
Yeah.
come back ready to be the superhero, you know?
Right. Then now they're on their mission.
Right, right.
I so we can get into some, we don't have to go through it in order, but we could go
Yeah,
through some more, we could zoom in on some more particular things. I want to
sure.
talk about how much I love the production design and the costuming on Krypton.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's got this without CG, it's every costume is luminous, and it's the same way that they did Tron later on, the first
Mm-hmm.
Tron, and it's the same way they did the lightsabers in the first Star Wars, which is
Oh,
they use this material. It's the same kind of material that they use for movie screens, where when you hit it with light, it reflects light back off. So, like if you see the behind the scenes, it looks like they're all just wearing like garbage made out of duct tape. Like they look, it's look like garbage. But when they hit it with the lights, um, everything is glowing, and I
yeah.
love that. And one thing that always like disturbs me, like even now, I'm like, God, that's a harsh thing. Which is when Krypton is being destroyed, and you see like these shots of people like falling to their doom, screaming. It's like
Right.
what a way to open a movie.
Right, right. There is this thing, and it's funny. This kind of brings it back to like what we were talking about with like Godzilla X Kong and Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. In movies, there's a moment when the imagery on screen, the music, the acting, they all just sync up perfectly, and it creates a sensation for everyone. And that's the stuff when you have all these movies based on nostalgia, these YouTube channels, podcasts where people are talking about their
Yeah.
past. It's like we're talking about those specific moments because there's something that happens in those moments that just hit us and they stick in our mind forever. Like I will always remember the people falling in
Mm,
Krypton, because it's like it's weird, it's fucking horrible,
yeah.
because like it's always the same story with Krypton where like Jor-El's trying to persuade everyone to like leave the planet or we have to stop what we're doing because it's going to destroy the planet. And everyone, like in our real fucking world, is like, oh, who cares? We're gonna just keep going.
Right.
And then
There's the woman on Krypton who's like, I just think that Krypton is shifting in its axis.
yes, yes, yes. Yeah, it's oh God, deniers. And so what happens is like they pay the price in this movie, and I think it might be the most severe in this movie than even like the Zack Snyder version,
Yeah.
you know?
It's
And
dark.
yeah, yeah, because like
And it
we
looks
keep
like
talking,
hell because you've got that red light.
right.
It's that's an interesting thing about the the Krypton part, which is like it's like all white or red or green, and then you get into Smallville and it's like all like there's even like a soft white haze over everything, like it looks like a memory. It's all like this like Norman Rockwell like Saturday Evening Post like version of Americana, like the football team and all that shit. So
Yes.
it's just so incredible the different movies in this one movie.
Yes, yes, yes. And
Uh,
that Krypton scene, I mean, we should definitely talk about Krypton in general and kind of flesh it out a little more. But like you were talking about like biblical stuff before with Moses and Jesus, like when they're falling, it's like out of a painting from like the Renaissance
yes,
or something where it's showing hell. It's like showing people literally falling into hell, you know?
yes.
It's
No,
it's
yeah, it's so true.
yeah. Do you think that like while we're talking about Krypton, like should we bring up John Williams' score now or should we save that for
Yes.
later?
No, yeah, let's bring it up.
Okay, so the John Williams score is just a fucking work of art. And I
Yes.
mean, this is John Williams in his prime. He's done Jaws at this point. He's done A New Hope at this point. He'll do Raiders of the Lost Ark in
Right.
like a year or two. Um, just so, so good. And you know, it's funny. I was thinking about John Williams. Doesn't it seem like when he does his scores that the music is actually like saying the names of the movie? You know,
Yes, yeah,
like
yeah.
Superman,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, like Star Wars is like that Bill
Yeah, yeah,
Murray
yeah.
SNL skit.
That's so true, yeah.
And I always feel that when I watch Superman, it's like literally saying like up in the sky, it's Superman, you
Yeah,
know?
that's yeah, right. And little kids would like say that. It's sort of intuitive.
Right, right.
What's
But
interesting to me is even though this is a unique score, what he does is compare it to like the theme to the TV show and the radio show, what it has in common, and then that continues up until Zack Snyder ruins it, is horns. Superman is horns. Like
yes.
the original show is like how's it go? It's like then no fuck. Anyway, the original show is like same thing. It's like horns, and then like later on in the which I love this, the animated series, the one that's connected, the Bruce Timm one. Again, it's like da 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 da
Right.
da da
Yes.
da. So it's like this very bombastic, almost like oh, what's his name? The da na 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 John Philip
Oh,
Sousa.
yes,
It's like
yes.
that kind of thing.
Yes, yes. I mean, like John Williams does amazing stuff with horns in all of his different movies, and it has so much excitement. Like, before you get to Krypton, we should just talk about how the intro to the movie, it's kind of weird, and I always forget this, that like it starts out with like a narration of a kid reading a comic,
Yeah,
and even before that, there is curtains, like it's like a stage play, and they
yeah,
pull back, and then it shows the Daily Planet. And it's weird because like what the kid is saying about the Daily Planet doesn't really seem to match what then follows.
right.
It's just kind of like here's a kid talking about the Daily Planet, and then now we're on this other planet. It's just
Right,
weird.
right. No, it's weird. Yeah.
But I mean, we can talk about the intro sequence in a second too, but after you go through this incredible intro sequence with the John Williams score, you then show Krypton, and it's amazing because like you're far away on Krypton, you're on this icy surface, and it's playing that dun 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 dun
Yeah,
dun,
I love the
and
Krypton theme.
like it starts off slow and quiet, and it feels like a 70s sci-fi movie, and you get
Yeah.
closer and you get closer to that dome, and then the music just hits that crescendo once you hit that dome. I mean, that's amazing, man. That gives me
Yeah.
chills.
It's there's such grandeur
Hmm.
to the first two segments really, both Krypton and Kansas. And then later on it's like a lot of it's more like interiors. It's a lot of that jaunty, hey, like screwball comedy stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
like when the sort of like dome is opening so they can capture the three criminals in that like thing.
Yeah.
Like that's like it reminds me of 2001. It's like such a
Yes.
huge
Yes.
image. And
Yes.
beginning with that trial, which by the way, the first line of the movie was Richard Donner trying to indicate the tone, right? Because the first line of the movie is Jor-El saying, "This is no fantasy."
Ah, nice, nice,
And you see
nice.
like the people, the heads on the screens, like guilty, guilty.
Yes.
Like it's so like, what the fuck are we It's so wild.
Yeah.
And that's really a lot of that is such invention because Krypton, like that's a whole unique version of Krypton.
Mm-hmm.
Like you look at Krypton in the older stuff, and it's like it's a totally different looking thing. It looks like very like Buck Rogers kind of shit.
Exactly, exactly. And what they do with comics for the most part is they kind of marry that Silver Age Krypton where it does look like Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers kind of thing, and then this sort of crystalline Richard Donner version. That's kind of what the comic looks like. It's like those two
Yeah.
together, you
Yes.
know?
Yes. Yes.
And it's funny because like with that sequence, like we know as guys that like, research movies and stuff, it's like we know that's all like models and matte paintings.
Yeah.
But even when you're saying to yourself that's a model, you can still feel that kind of sense of scale when they do open up that dome. When Krypton does like collapse on itself and the people are falling, it's like you know what they're using to create those effects, but you still can like feel what you're supposed to be feeling in that moment of like, this is this massive thing. The whole opening sequence, it's so funny because I try to picture being someone in the 70s going to see this, especially if you're not a comic book fan. It's really weird, right?
Yes, it is.
I,
Yes,
I don't
absolutely.
I don't know how they did that effect where it has like it looks like these two hula hoops circling the three criminals, but like that's really cool and alien looking, those the little rings that circle them. And then
Yes.
the
Yes.
the the faces on the screen, that's such a comic book image with these like giant faces
Yeah.
around the three criminals. Yeah, I want to tell like a little quick story. I used to go to people's houses, people with special needs like disabilities and stuff. I would go to their houses and help them, or I'd take them out into the community. And this one dude, he loved watching movies, and he was watching this movie, right? And we're watching this part with the three criminals and the Kryptonian people are judging them. And then Zod has his line where he's like, "You will kneel before me, and if not you, then your heirs." And the guy that I was helping, he always thought that he was saying your ass. So he's like Superman's gonna come after your ass too. He said.
I love it.
So,
I
but
work I, I work
go
with
ahead.
people with intellectual disabilities, and
Yeah.
one of the people I work with lives in a group home, and one of his roommates, who's not even like he's not even my case, but I just talk to him because I go and visit there. One of his roommates has an incredible Masters of the Universe collection of figures. So like when I go there, I'm constantly me and this guy are like shooting the shit about like He-Man figures.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's like it's incredible. That's funny. That's some of the ways fandom really like is one of the ways that I find that I can connect with people with intellectual disabilities.
Yes. Yes. I mean, that's the thing about this movie and so many of the movies that like get mined nowadays for like legacy sequels and stuff like that is that there's something just regardless of your intellectual level, your political beliefs, anything like that, where
Yeah.
you come from, there's just something in these movies that like strike you and affect you.
Yes.
And even though Superman is a very American concept and this movie is very American,
Yeah.
you have people in other countries that love this movie, that love this character,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But like just kind of flipping that, the sequence on Krypton is so weird and bizarre. And then you have like Terrence Stamp and I can't remember the other two actors that play Ursa and Nan.
Yeah.
But
Nan was
like
like a mob guy. Did you ever hear interviews from him?
no,
He
what's
was
the deal with
like a
that?
mob enforcer who like wanted to like be in movies and like crazy shit.
Oh,
Look him up.
well, he's intimidating looking. He's
Yeah,
crazy,
yeah.
and so, that whole sequence is weird. That the Phantom Zone, like, it's not really clear what the Phantom Zone is. It's just basically like
Right.
this sheet of glass that kind of sucks them up, and I guess that is the Phantom Zone. I don't know,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
very different in the comics too. But I mean, what's weird about this is that they filmed this and Superman 2 simultaneously, kind of like
Yes.
the Lord of the Rings movies, and they finished 75% of Superman 2 before Richard Donner
Yeah.
left. And so, like, this whole sequence really just feels like it's setting up Superman 2, but it's the
Right.
beginning of Superman, the movie, you know?
And it's amazing when you think about it because like now in almost every franchise movie you see, there is time devoted to setting up other movies,
Yep.
whether it be
Yep.
post credit or like I was talking about in Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, all of that shit with like James Acaster that you could cut right out of that movie, which is like setting up like the I don't know, like Winston's team later on.
Right.
Like this movie that's the only part that sets up part two. Like you wouldn't if you just watched it on its own, it doesn't feel incomplete. It's a whole movie to itself.
Right.
It's not like this is part one and then it doesn't even have a cliffhanger ending. It
Nope.
ends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It ends greatly too. And I mean, obviously we'll get to that in a minute, but since we're kind of doing we kind of covered Krypton a lot, I think we should talk about the opening credit sequence because
Sure.
there's so much magic in that opening credit sequence. You have, like I said before, they show the Daily Planet, and I think it looks kind of like it's in black and white,
Yeah.
and then they cut up to the stars, and then you have that dun 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 dun, and
Yeah.
like if I go interact with anyone that's around our age, and I just go dun 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 dun, they're gonna
Yeah.
be like Superman, you
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
and just that effect that they have on the credits, where like the credits kind of swoop in
Yeah.
and I saw this movie, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7 years ago in the theater at the Alamo Draft House with my daughter. And I remember being in the theater and having that sound. And like
Mm.
when the credits would swoop in, like and like it
Yeah.
would play that music, I was like, holy shit,
Right.
what is going on? This is incredible, you
It's
know?
it's that Richard Donner, his marching orders, which was like, this is important. Like
Yes.
everything, like even the first person we see is like Marlon Brando, like the most important actor of all time, like speaking in a very serious way, right? Like it's all like this is important. This is very
Yes.
important. And what's funny is,
Yeah.
and I know you'll know this, when they made the Masters of the Universe movie, they basically just stole this credit sequence
Of
full
course.
bore.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. And the music sounds just like it. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just a bad facsimile of this music.
Yeah. And it goes on. And one thing I wanted to point out about the credits too that's interesting is that like it says Gene Hackman before it says Superman. And
Yeah,
then Christopher Reeve, I think he's not even like the second name you see. I think like you
right,
see Marlon Brando. Gene
right.
Hackman gets top billing. And then Margot Kidder, they don't even say Margot Kidder's name till like 6 or 7 fucking names in.
Really?
I'm like, what the hell? Yeah, they say all these other random actors that like I can't associate them with their character,
Right.
but like Margot Kidder is not like the third or fourth person.
It's so interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's that
yeah,
legal bullshit that even back then they were still doing. Like,
yeah,
G Christopher Reeve Whaley wasn't anybody at that point. So like
yeah,
to get Christopher Reeve, they had to be like, well, who do you put on the poster? So that's why they spent so much money on Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman. And by the way, Gene Hackman is so brilliant in this movie. He's so funny. Some of the lines I
oh,
still quote, like,
oh,
Otis, take the man's cape. My lawyer
yeah,
will be reaching out to you about damages for the door. Like
yeah.
all his shit is so funny.
My,
Um,
my my favorite thing that he does in this movie, it's not going to work on a podcast, but like my favorite thing is when Miss Tessmacher is like, my mom lives in Sacramento or whatever he says, and then he just like looks at his watch
yeah,
and he does that face of like, not
yeah.
anymore.
Like,
I
no, she
love
doesn't.
that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, he's so great. And
yeah.
Ned. Well, before we get to the last sequence, I want to say a little bit more about Smallville,
Sure, sure,
which
sure.
is my to me my best version of Superman's Earth parents. Or they're old. They should be old as dirt. Like as time has gone on, they make them younger and younger and sexy and hot, and and the same thing happened to Aunt May, right?
Oh
Like she's
yeah,
like hot now. Like to me, like I love that they are even when they first get him as a baby, they're so old. And I have to say, like, talk about like gives me chills, like magical. The
yes,
moment of this movie where he's the father is he's fixing the tire, he's got the car on a jack, and then the jack falls and it almost falls on him, and then you see baby Clark is holding up the car,
yeah,
and you hear the John Williams music. To
yeah.
me,
Oh
that's
my
like
God.
such magic. Like that's the simplest effect in the world, but that is so effective to me. Of like,
Yep.
wow, look at this.
Yep. Yes, exactly. Like the thing is, you think about this movie and you think, okay, well, I saw this when I was a kid. It's kind of drilled into you when you're a kid that Superman's awesome and that there's this kind of majesty about him. But I really do think it's like Star Wars, where if you were to show this to a person and it doesn't matter what age they are or what language they speak, there's just something in the filmmaking itself that
Yeah,
like it just hits you. Like that sequence is so great when he lifts up the car. You know, it's like I was trying to think of like what are the definitive moments of this movie that I think everyone kind of remembers. Everyone remembers the opening credits and the theme.
yeah,
They remember like Krypton and how weird it is. Um, I think they usually remember when Superman rescues Lois. And
Right.
then of course they always remember that end sequence when he spins around the earth.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But the thing is, the reason why every one of these things is memorable is because everything is like set up to where it's like leading to this crescendo, and it hits that crescendo, and it is an emotional beat every single time, where it hits
Well,
that
yeah.
crescendo.
That's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Francis Ford Coppola like says like, like forget like script writing guides. Like if you want a movie, you just need like 7 moments.
Yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
a movie.
yes. And this
And
movie does
yeah,
have 7 fucking moments. Yeah,
yeah,
that's for sure.
yeah.
Um, so I think we were kind of talking about Smallville and just like why don't we talk about like the actors and stuff, right?
Sure.
Okay, so like obviously I think that like the definitive Superman is Christopher Reeve Superman, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And what happens is like you have younger people who start to say like, well, Henry Cavill, and then you have these weird kind of Zack Snyder cult people that feel like Henry Cavill is like the definitive Superman, even though I'd say like maybe 10% of his Superman kind of captures the Superman essence,
Right.
whereas Christopher Reeve is like the walking Superman
Yeah.
essence,
Yeah. Well, I would say
Yeah.
that and this is no offense to Christopher Reeve. But I would say what makes it so effective is the same reason I think Luke Skywalker is so effective, which is like there's not a ton there. And that's no disrespect to Mark Hamill. There's enough that it could be an avatar for the audience to sort of project onto. Like
Mm,
it almost works better to not be too particular, to not be too idiosyncratic. Like he's just like a handsome young man. Both of them. You know what I mean? Like something really works about that.
hmm I feel like I mean, that's a fucking excellent point. I didn't even think of that at all. But you're right. I feel like so much of this movie is people reacting to Superman, people interacting with Superman
Yeah.
versus Superman's own internal dialogue or his own feelings and stuff like that. You know,
Yes.
like when Superman first shows up, there's that montage where he's like saving people and he's getting criminals and stuff, and
Yeah.
it's everyone's reaction to seeing Superman. That's what that sequence is. Then when he goes with Lois, it's all about Lois's wonder of being with Superman. Then
Yeah.
when he goes to get Lex at the end, it's like Lex is just throwing everything at him
Yeah.
and he's
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
shrugging. But it's always like the reaction to what Superman is versus like he's having these conversations like he's like, I don't know what to do with these powers. I mean, that is in this movie, but it's such a small part compared to what it is nowadays. Nowadays, it's almost like the inverse, where
Right.
it's
Right.
like so much about the hero's struggles and like their identity, whereas it's like more like Superman as an icon that everyone's interacting with.
Yes. That's perfect. That's perfectly put. Like
Yeah.
he's not. Oh, really? After the Smallville sequence, he's sort of like his arc is over in a way. He knows what he's
Yep.
doing.
Yep.
It's just
Yep.
about meeting somebody like Lex Luthor, and I think
Yeah.
he's so gee golly gosh like positive that
Yeah.
just the idea of somebody like Lex Luthor like off puts him, like
Yeah.
somebody who could be that cruel.
But
Yeah,
and Lois is the contrast to that too, because Lois talks so quickly. She's so busy. What's really interesting about the framing of the sequences with Lois is that Lois is always kind of talking, and like as
yeah,
she's talking, she's doing something else. She's like kind of the embodiment of like ADHD, where it's like she's like
yeah,
doing
yeah,
like five
yeah.
different things at once. But Clark is always quietly just walking behind her. Like he's
Hmm.
like this calm thing, and she's just running circles around him,
Yeah,
and she says condescending things and he kind of says self-deprecating things and then just sort of innocent things. So there's that contrast between the two of them. But there's these two fucking sequences that are just fucking amazing with her, and people always talk about one of them all the time, but when like they get mugged like pretty
yeah,
quickly, and he's all scared. He's like, "Oh, we better do what she says," or
yeah,
he
yeah,
says, and then the guy fucking shoots them, but
yeah,
he blocks the bullet. Oh my god, that's so good. And then of course, the other sequence I'm talking about when he's in Lois's apartment
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and he takes off the glasses and he
yeah,
changes his posture. I
yeah.
mean, people cite that all the time where they're like, "That's Superman," or
Right.
like that explains why people make that where they don't connect Superman with Clark.
Right. You don't even really right. You when he does that, you can tell how he's actually playing them differently. That like
Mm-hmm.
his posture is different and the way he
Mm-hmm.
like puts his chest out is different.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the guy who mugs them. This movie
Yeah,
has a lot of like really great like 70s New York stereotypes. Like that guy's
absolutely.
like, "Oh, I'm gonna turn over a new leaf right after I rip this lady's purse off." Or maybe my favorite is the one who I think he's supposed to be a pimp because he's dressed like a pimp and then he's got all of these women behind him and Superman comes out. This is when he's gonna save Lois, and he goes, "Whoa, Jim, that's a bad outfit." And then then he goes, then he fucking flies, and he goes, "Whoa!" again. I love that.
Yeah, that's the first time we see Superman, and right before he flies, the pimp guy says that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's so
he calls
great.
him Jim. That's so great. Or the cops, like, "Go on down to Murphy's bar and finish what you're doing." All
Right,
right,
right.
man. Like good old fashioned alcoholic Irish cops.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh man, I love that sequence so much. It's so fucking good. And like one of my favorite parts is when the guy is climbing up the side of the building with the suction cups.
Oh yeah,
And you take a couple of minutes to like establish, okay, this guy's climbing up the side of the building. It's difficult. And then you have this great shot where like it's just Superman's feet against the window.
yeah.
And then you look up and he's like, the elevator broken. He says something like
Oh,
that.
all of
And,
that shit. So
oh,
good.
so fucking good.
The guy hits him with
The
a
shove,
fucking
a
iron.
crowbar,
Yeah, and he's
crowbar.
like, "Bad vibrations." I love that. I love all that corny shit.
Yeah. It's funny with that sequence. I'm like, wait a minute. Is like Superman really helping in that one particular spot? Because he takes their boat and he just puts it like right in the middle of
Yeah, he creates
downtown.
such issues.
Yeah. Can we talk about that sequence with the helicopter though and Margot Kidder?
Sure.
So one thing I noticed watching this movie more recently is that like Margot Kidder has at least two scenes of like total distress where she's like screaming, and in both instances it seems like a fucking horror movie.
Yeah.
And it's funny because she was in Black Christmas, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But like in this movie, there's scenes where she looks like she's just like scared out of her fucking mind,
Yeah.
right? And one of them is that helicopter sequence that is so well done
Yes.
with the helicopter like spinning around and it's like smashing parts of the building and then it falls off she's literally hanging from the helicopter at one point and then
Yeah.
Superman catches her. I think that like just Margot Kidder deserves some of our praise just for like how scared she seems in those two sequences.
Right. She sells it.
Oh
She
yeah.
sells it. But I think
Yeah.
she also going back to what we were saying before about how this movie establishes things going forward in the Superman story. I think she's the one who really makes Lois like funny and sharp witted and sharp
Mm-hmm.
tongued. And like, I feel like every Lois after this is like
Mm-hmm.
this sort of like
Is
second
this.
wave feminist Lois who's like
Mm-hmm.
super on top of everything, not afraid to like talk to the boss.
Yeah.
So like basically like if you look at like the old TV show, like Clark is like a more respected reporter than her. And in this and moving forward in the Lois and Clark dynamic, Lois is always the one with the power.
Oh yeah.
Whereas in the Superman Lois dynamic, Superman's the one with the power, which creates this triangle. Like I
Yes.
feel like she brings all of that to the character.
Yes, 1000%. Like Margot Kidder's Lois is like the template for Lois moving forward. And like in the comics, and I mean, even in the animated stuff too, but in the comics, definitely, Lois is usually like the greatest reporter on the planet.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like she's
yeah.
the greatest reporter ever. And yeah, she's always like two steps ahead of everybody else, including Clark. Uh no, you hit the nail on the head there. She's like her attitude and stuff, that's the Lois moving forward from here.
Yeah. Well, so you
Yeah.
said let's talk about the actors. Some of the other performances are really good.
Oh hell yeah.
You've got Mark McClure as Jimmy Olsen. His other big thing was he was Marty McFly's older brother, Dave McFly. I love Ned Beatty as Otis.
Yes.
All of that stuff could be corny, but somehow like it all works so well in this.
Yeah.
Um, I love like Otis Berg.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Jackie Cooper as Mr. White, I love. I
Yes.
so many of his lines, like I think are so quotable. Like "Don't call me sugar," or Clark Kent may seem like a mild-mannered reporter. Not only does he know how to treat his editor-in-chief with proper respect, not only does he have a snappy pro style, but he is, in my 40 years in this business, the fastest typist I have ever seen. Like
Right, right.
that dialogue is so funny. Like when he's got them all in the room and he's like, "Does he have a girlfriend? What's his favorite ball team?" And then Clark goes to answer, which is
Yeah.
such a quick joke. I didn't even notice that joke when I was a kid.
Yeah.
He steps up and the secretary's right there and she's like, "Okay, chief." Like I just love everything about him. Um,
Yeah. It's funny
yeah,
because like with Perry White, you have pretty iconic actors playing him afterwards too, right? Like in
yeah,
Superman Returns, it's kind of funny because you mentioned the Masters of the Universe movie, but like Frank Langella is Perry White in Superman
yes,
Returns, right? So you get like a little bit of full circle, right? Because that's also like the Cannon guys did Superman 4.
yeah,
But
yeah,
like
yeah,
but he's Perry White, and I think he's really good in that too. Then you have Lawrence Fishburne who plays him in the Zack Snyder
right.
movies too. So yeah, but this is kind of like the definitive Perry White too, where he's always busy. And yeah, I love him too. I've never seen that actor in other movies. Is he in other stuff too?
He's in other stuff. I've been watching all of Columbo. I actually just watched an episode of Columbo where he was the killer.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
He was like a
Sure.
political, he was like running for mayor or something, and he
Hmm.
like killed his campaign manager.
Yeah.
It was a good one. That was actually a few years before this. But yeah, he's like a
Yeah.
comedic actor. He's so with the cigar and everything. Like I feel like J. Jonah Jameson gets a lot from his performance of Mr. White.
Right. Those are examples of like DC and Marvel characters where they're essentially like parallels to each other.
Yeah, yeah,
Like the Flash and Quicksilver, or like Namor and Aquaman. Like,
yeah,
yeah, it's like those two are like the two, and the Daily Bugle and the Daily Planet are like the same thing.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But but Spider-Man is the Jimmy Olsen, right? Versus
Right,
the Clark
exactly. Right,
Kent.
right. The pit.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, I
no,
don't want
I
to say.
mean,
I want to mention her because I think she's great. Valerie Perrin as Miss Tessmacher. She did
absolutely.
not do a lot. She was a Playboy playmate.
Oh, yes.
So she was like known as this beautiful figure. I think she's so
Yes.
funny in this. She's
Yes.
still alive. She's in her 80s. She
Uh,
sadly has Parkinson's disease.
Oh,
And somebody did a documentary of her a couple years ago. She only was in like a handful of movies. She
huh.
and her other big thing besides this was she was in the movie Lenny, playing Lenny Bruce's wife.
Huh. Okay.
But
Wow.
this is like I always think of her as like Miss Tessmacher, and like
Yes,
I
of
think
course.
Miss Tessmacher, it's such a good foil to Gene Hackman.
Yes. I noticed something weird this time. There's this one sequence when like Lex gets pissed off, I think because they mess up something with the nukes. I can't remember what it is, but like he calls Miss Tessmacher and like she runs into the room and Ned Betty runs into the room and they kind of run in together and they both look flustered. And like she kind of like goes like this with her mouth, like she like like kind of wipes her mouth and then like Ned Betty's kind of like adjusting his clothes. And I was like, is that implying that they were like making out or doing something like behind
Wow, I
Lex's
didn't
back?
know. Wow,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
never even caught that.
yeah.
I
Rewatch
yeah.
it and see what you think. You know?
One thing that I kind of like, but younger people it doesn't hold up. I told you I showed this on class, and a lot of the young kids were like, "That's not good." But I love that she kisses Superman before
Superman.
letting him free.
Mm-hmm.
The students were like, "Well, that's not consent," which I understand. But there's something
Yeah.
I don't know, something I like about it. I like how easily she's swayed to the good side just by how good he is.
Yes.
And then
Well,
she's like, she kisses him because I didn't think you'd let me later.
right. Well, I like that sequence because she also makes him promise to rescue her mother first,
Right.
right?
And she
I didn't
says, "You
remember that
never
part.
lie.
You
You have
never
to
lie.
promise you because you never lie."
Yeah. Well, and see, like that's one thing that brings up another point I wanted to make too. It's interesting because like Superman has that montage where he does a whole bunch of things, and then essentially you just go right to Lex's scheme, right?
Right.
And but between that montage and Lex's scheme, it seems like Superman becomes like a big part of the culture. Like the fact that she
Yeah.
says you never lie. I mean, Lois's article obviously gives a lot of information
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
But like people like recognize him immediately and stuff like that
Yeah.
afterwards. It's like he's just become part of the fixture by this point.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um.
Um.
Mhm.
Well, there are things that we should talk about that are like they don't really kind of they don't hold up as much, right? Like the sequence where Lois interviews him, that's a great sequence. The flying sequence is great, but that's where it seems like the most awkward when they're like flying together and like she's
Yeah,
starting struggling, you know. And then also there's of course like the infamous like poem that Lois is saying
right,
to herself.
right. So
You know,
originally that was supposed to be a song,
that
but
makes
she
sense.
couldn't sing, so they made it a poem. So it's really with contemporary filmmaking, you never see anything like that, so it seems so
No,
corny to us.
right.
The only thing I would say in terms of defending it is that as you know, a big part of the medium of comics is interior monologue,
Yes.
and it's one section of this film where you get an interior monologue, but
Yeah.
the fact that it still rhymes like the way the song would rhyme
Yeah.
almost makes it worse. Like you
Yes.
could keep it, but I would cut out certain things. Um,
Yes.
but that's this. See, that seems I think important because, and that's what I used to show in the class where I taught about gender, because I would talk about how like Superman is established not only as a man but as heterosexual in that scene, because she says what color my underwear and he can't see it because she's in front of the lead, and then she walks back and he goes pink, and then she
Pink.
goes, "Do
Yeah.
you like pink?" What does that mean? And I remember I would ask my students and they would giggle. I go, what does she mean when she says, "Do you like pink?" And then he says, "I like pink very much, Lois." Right?
Yeah.
It's like, are you straight or do you
Right.
or do you fuck? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
It's
she
like, do
also
you
asked
like
him, "Do you eat?"
pussy?
Right, exactly. She asked, like, "Do you eat? Do you know what I mean?" Like, she wants to see like if he's human or not. And of course, Lex, like, he has no hair, so he's not a man. And
Mm.
in it's not in this one, but in part two, there's a joke about Lex listening to Liberace records. So it seems
Okay.
like they like Lex is not like Superman is a man, and part of being a man is being straight and loving vagina, and
Yes.
Lex Luthor is his opposite because he's not a man and he's not straight and he's a little gay. It's
Yeah.
and I'm not taking the movie to task. I just it's just a way of looking at using this as a lens of looking at how culture depicts sexuality and gender and
Sure. Well, I mean, that's really interesting because I mean, like with Miss Tessmacher, there really isn't the implication that like Lex does anything with her or like
right.
he's like having sex with her. As a matter of fact, what I just said before, it almost
Yeah.
seems like her and Otis are getting it on the side, right? But
Yeah.
he kind of uses her like a tool, the way that he uses Otis, where it's like, go do this, go do that,
Right.
versus like, oh, I got this hot chick with me,
Right. There's no
Um,
implication that they have a relationship that is
right.
in any way romantic.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you bring up that one part for gender discussions, because it's a weird scene too, because like it's the most sexual thing in the whole movie,
Right.
and it seems like they're totally okay with it. And then there really isn't any kind of other sexual stuff. There's a couple times where like women are like impressed with Superman. Like Miss Tessmacher talks about how good looking he is. She mentions his dimples and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think some other people kind of like lust over Superman, but like that's it.
Right. And in that scene, Lois also goes, "How big are you?" And then corrects herself and goes, "How tall are you?" Like it's
Jesus.
it's it's real direct stuff. And
Yeah.
it's an interview, but she's dressed in this.
Oh yeah, I know.
Uh, uh, um, the her outfits are great. I love all of Lois's outfits,
Yes,
and what she's
agreed.
wearing there is like this flowy thing. It looks like almost like lingerie.
Yes, yes.
And I love the outfit later on in the when he rescues her. She's wearing like a yellow beret and like a yellow jacket. And I,
Yeah.
I I guess I wasn't paying attention enough, but I noticed when I watched it yesterday, he realizes that she is in trouble because her beret falls out of the helicopter and Clark picks it up outside of
Oh,
the Daily Planet, and that's when he looks up.
that's fucking awesome. Yeah, yeah. Um, with him and her, it's so funny because like there's that dynamic that like Clark is one distinct guy. She doesn't know that that's Superman, right? There's
Yeah,
Clark and there's Superman, and we've already kind of talked about this today. But like it's this weird sequence where he takes her flying, and it's almost like the equivalent of like this macho guy goes and has a ton of sex with her, and she's still like thinking about him. Then this
right.
goofy guy comes in and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna treat you to the night on the town. We're gonna have some burgers, right?" and,
Yeah,
and, and she's like so like stunned and shocked after flying with Superman that like she's kind of saying gibberish and she's not even paying attention to Clark. She
yeah,
says, "I'll go get my coat." She doesn't get her coat. And going back to what you were saying about like her outfits, I was like, wait a minute, she's going on a date with Clark wearing that? Like it looks like she's wearing
Yeah,
Victoria's Secret or something.
yeah,
But there's such a distinct difference between like Clark and Superman
yeah.
that like he's like the sort of the cuck or something, that takes
Right, right,
her out on the
right.
date.
It's like, yeah, like he gets off on that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
he's
when
just
like
yeah,
tell
go
me
ahead.
how much you like Superman while we
Right,
have.
right, right. Right. He's like drinking his shake at the burger place, and he's like, "Oh, did he hold you tightly?" Like something like that. Yeah, 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 yeah. As you were
Yeah,
flying, you saw
yeah.
that
I
bird.
mean, you're right. It's so sexual. Like when she's like, Clark says something about like Peter Pan or whatever. And he's like, Peter Pan. He flew with children, Lois. It's so. But it's funny that also those things become archetypes in the Superman story. Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of the new show, My
Superman and
Adventures with
Lois.
Superman,
Oh yes, yeah, okay, yeah,
the
yeah.
animated anime
Mm-hmm.
show. And they do that in that one. There's the date first interview. Like she gives him his name and
Mm-hmm.
she introduces him to the world through that interview. Like these are like little like beats that you have to always hit.
Yes, yeah. Lois pretty much has to come up with the name of Superman herself.
Yeah, yeah. Let me
Yeah.
ask you, is this the best Superman movie?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Yes, I would say it is the best Superman movie. I would not say it's my favorite. I think Superman 2 is my favorite
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
because I like all the stuff with Zod and the Kryptonians. Um, but yeah, I think this is the best Superman movie. Well, what about you? What do you think, man?
Definitely Batman versus Superman
Oh,
is
oh,
no, I'm just fucking
yeah,
around. No,
yeah.
I would say this is I think it's the best and I do think it's my favorite.
Okay, okay.
Um, but two is great. And two's like a perfect way to make a sequel. But like now let's like you really get into it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and but to me, what blows my mind is like I feel like Superman is so it's such a good character. Like people mock Superman and people say like, oh, how can you if he's so strong, how do you even write stories? It's like, well, your question doesn't make sense because we've been writing stories for 70 years. Like, obviously we do. I feel like this movie, I feel like this movie part two and a little bit Superman Returns, although that's very flawed. I at least get close, but I feel like there could be better Superman movies. So I feel like I, here's the thing: as much as I love this movie, I feel like you have to divorce yourself from a lot of what this movie does and just say like, all right, I'm not going to use the theme, I'm not going to use some of this stuff, and Zack Snyder went a whole bad, terrible direction with it. But there's so much you can do, and maybe like don't use Lex. Say we're not going to use Lex. We're going to use somebody different.
Right.
It blows my mind that there aren't a bunch more really good Superman movies because there could be. Because there's
Mm-hmm.
good Superman shows. Like I said, the '90s animated series is such a perfect example of like how to do a Superman show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny because Batman. I mean, I can't even like it'll take up a lot of time if I try to count every movie that Batman is in. But there's
Right.
way more Batman movies than there are Superman
And way
movies.
more good Batman movies.
Way more good Batman movies. And then there's so much more of the rogues gallery that's been used besides the Joker, even though the Joker's used a lot,
Yeah.
right? Um, but then you always just have Lex. Sometimes you have Zod. Everyone always thinks there's going to be a Brainiac movie, but there hasn't been one yet.
No.
And of
No,
course,
they
these
haven't
characters
been.
are used in video games. They're used in comic books and cartoons all the time. Like you see
Yeah,
Brainiac all the
yeah,
time, and
yeah.
other guys. You see Doomsday and stuff, right? Sometimes, but it's so funny that we're having this conversation right now because like at this moment they are filming another Superman and it's
Yeah, the
literally
James
just
Gunn one.
Superman. Yeah, because
I
it was called
Yeah.
Superman Legacy, but now they've changed it to just Superman. You know?
I have high hopes for it. I like James Gunn. I've liked
Yeah,
his movies. Uh,
yeah.
I mean, of all his movies, the only one I really don't like is the second Guardians. But I love the
Oh,
first ones. I love the third one. I
yeah.
like a lot of his stuff. I liked Peacemaker.
Oh,
So
yes.
so I have hopes for it. I have a lot of hopes for it.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. This kind of gives some symmetry, like, bookends, but like the beginning of our discussion was about how I feel like a lot of these like legacy sequels, these reboots, they're kind of missing some kind of quality that makes you feel something, that wonder or that just that feeling, that connection. And when I was watching Kong, Godzilla X Kong, I was like, oh, in the Guardians movies, that's where I would feel this kind of like wonder and connection.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
like he can tap into that. In Peacemaker, there's moments where it's like he gets it. Like it's like this is how you
yeah.
sync up the imagery and the music. Like James Gunn gets it. He doesn't get it perfectly every single time, but he does it a lot better than most people that make comic book adaptations.
So you just made me think James Gunn would do a great Ghostbusters movie, I think.
Oh my God. I
Because
mean, you know
James
that he
Gunn is actually funny. Like he gets comedy, which is why I
yeah,
think Guardians works so well.
right. And you know that he wrote like the Scooby-Doo movies and stuff, right? So he's kind of got
Oh, yeah,
experience.
yeah, 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 yeah.
He's got experience like kind of working with like kid connected things. I mean that's a whole discussion for another day too, like Ghostbusters and kids and stuff.
Yeah.
But no, I Lex is in this new Superman movie. You know, James Holt, or is it Nicholas Holt? Nicholas
Yeah,
Holt,
Nicholas
right?
Hoult. Oh,
Yeah,
I didn't realize he was Lex.
he's Lex. Yeah. Michael Rosenbaum from Smallville just interviewed him recently, and they were talking about playing Lex. And
Oh,
it's
okay.
funny, bringing it back to our discussion. Nicholas Holt, he said that he didn't really study other Lexes, and then Michael Rosenbaum said, you know, Michael Rosenbaum who played Lex on Smallville, he's
Right.
like, I consider Gene Hackman to be the definitive Lex. You know,
Interesting because I feel like his performance is so different from Gene Hackman's.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
right, right. Gene Hackman's Lex, the only other Lex in modern media that's like Gene Hackman's Lex is Kevin Spacey's Lex. And that's
Yeah.
because Kevin Spacey's Lex literally is Gene Hackman's Lex continued.
Right, right, right.
And but even Kevin Spacey's Lex is much more sinister, you know, than the Gene Hackman Lex.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
fucking like Shiv Superman with kryptonite at the end of that
Yes, yeah.
movie, right?
Yeah.
But like Lex is such an interesting character. My like if you were asking me like what do I think is like the best Superman adaptation, I would actually say it's the Tim verse Superman because that's where it's like firing on all cylinders. It's where you
Yes.
have Clancy Brown as Lex, and it's
Yeah.
that version of Lex, you know, and he interacts with Batman and stuff like that. Like I would say that that's kind of like the definitive.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And we haven't mentioned, well, you just did, but we haven't really talked about Smallville. I liked Smallville,
Mhm.
towards, I mean, it went on too long, but
Yeah,
I liked Smallville. And I don't think you've checked it out yet, but check out the anime. Check out My Adventures with
yeah.
Superman. I like that a lot.
Okay.
Um, there's so much good stuff to do with Superman. Part of me is like, let's do it.
Yeah.
There's so much there.
Yeah, it's weird because there always is this dynamic of like that the movie is like the pinnacle of what you can do with media. That like once you get to a movie, because it costs so much money and so many people are going to see it, that like that's the highest standard is the movie.
But
And
Superman works as a serial, which is
right,
what
right,
comics are. Like
right,
Superman works better as like I think
right.
that's why probably the most like uh um uh faithful, let's say, adaptation is the animated series.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Like Superman, more so than Batman and stuff. Like you kind of associate Superman with like listening to him on the radio, and
Yeah.
then of course like even the old show with George Reeves, right? Right. That was the show. And then there was
Yes.
also like the cartoon that was the Fleischer cartoon, which is like
Yes,
this
those are so
amazing
good. Yeah.
fucking yeah. So yeah, like Superman does work more in like a serialized kind of small adventures versus like this big definitive story. Like
Yeah.
Batman has like definitive Batman stories that maybe
Yes, it's
even were
true.
told in a serialized form, but it's like okay, the Killing Joke and Year
Yeah,
One,
that's
and
true.
like Superman does have stories like that, but they don't resonate as much as Batman stories.
No, you're totally right. You're totally
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, Pete,
Um,
thank you so much for coming on and talking about Superman the movie. I'm so glad I did this with you and you
yeah.
were able to bring your vast knowledge. What's going on your channels? What's going on in your world?
Well, for like the six people that listen to my show or watch it, I really appreciate them. But no, you know, I have one channel called Comic Books Transformed. If you like my stuff talking about if you like how I talked about the Superman today, then you'll probably like Comic Books Transformed. Brian and I right now currently are covering Invincible, which is on Amazon Prime, and then we are covering X-Men 97 on Disney Plus. So we're covering some animated
How is
stuff.
that? I haven't
I think
watched it
it's
yet.
fucking fantastic.
Oh, really? That's
Oh yeah,
awesome.
I love it. And yeah, and you can check out our videos too if you want to kind of get my thoughts on it. And then like um on the Lassercast, Danny and I we cover horror movies and streaming shows. Recently we did a Dario Argento run where we were
Yes, I saw
covering.
that.
Yeah, and
Did you like Tiambre?
I've loved every single
Oh, you
Argento
love, yeah,
film
yeah.
I've seen. And the thing is that I've never watched an Argento movie until this
Oh,
year.
wow.
Yeah.
What's great about
So
Italian movies are they'll be like, oh, this is a great story. How do we get boobs into this? That's
right.
Italian movies.
Right. And can a dog bite one of the nipples too, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I've loved those Argento films and we've been covering them on the channel. But then we did cover Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. My review was a little bit more harsh than Mike's. If you want to check out mine. And then tomorrow, Danny and I, for Easter, we're gonna record Godzilla X Kong. So we're gonna do our review tomorrow.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Very good. Pete, thank you so much for being here. We end every episode by saying
Go bye bye.